XRP has fallen more than 60%, and Ripple's success won't save it. I'm not saying this. It's some article on Yahoo Finance saying this. Now, my research usually does not rely on some article from Yahoo Finance, but this one article had me thinking. The article basically says that all of the success that Ripple is having, like achieving new milestones in XRP ledger, new acquisitions, new institutional use cases of the platform, ETF inflows, the increasing market cap of RLUSD, none of this will save the price of XRP from dumping, because none of these achievements include the use of XRP tokens. It just includes the use of Ripple's infrastructure and their network and their products. Now, I'll elaborate this very shortly, so make sure that you stick around and don't lose hope too soon. Now, even though that this argument is not entirely accurate, and I'll explain shortly how it isn't, but it does present some very solid arguments that do explain the gap that we are witnessing between what the Ripple is doing as a company and why it isn't translating into price action for XRP as holders hope. So let's get into it. The article basically says that Ripple has been having a very successful year, which it is. I mean, look at some of the recent achievements. We have Ripple's XRP ledger. It now hosts $2.3 billion in tokenized real-world assets, which is up from under $1 billion at the start of the year. Then we have Deutsche Bank, a German multinational investment bank, which is integrating Ripple's payment technology to improve efficiency in areas like cross-border payments. Then we have the stablecoin, the RLUSD, which was launched back in 2024, and it has already hit a market cap of $1.56 billion, and it is being used by BlackRock and many other exchanges for real liquidity. Then we have Ripple's own share buyback program, which has kicked off recently. $750 million worth of shares at a whopping $50 billion company valuation, which is up from 25% from just a few months ago. Then we have XRP spot ETFs that have pulled in over $1.4 billion in cumulative inflows since launch, with Goldman Sachs quietly becoming the biggest institutional holders at around $154 million. Now, all of these are massive news, especially when it comes to institutional use cases of the platform, because if big institutions are using a platform, that means large sums of money might flow through the system, which benefits the native currency of the platform. Now, we all know that XRP token is the heart of the Ripple, and it should be used by all of these institutions if they are using Ripple's network and their infrastructure or any of the product. But in fact, XRP isn't being used. Holders aren't realizing this. Whenever they hear any such news about a new institution using Ripple, they immediately assume that these institutes will invest heavily into XRP, or they will at least use XRP for their purposes, and that will increase the demand of the token, which consequently will increase the price of XRP. I mean, that's a pretty straightforward thinking, right? And it should be like this, but it isn't. And that's why all these news isn't translating into price action. Now, here's what the article says. So why isn't XRP benefiting? Because most of Ripple's wins don't actually involve XRP. Ripple, a closely held company, has genuine enterprise traction, but its most widely adopted product, what was called RippleNet, functions primarily as a messaging layer and doesn't require banks to touch XRP, and most don't. Ripple's liquidity feature, what was called on-demand liquidity, is the primary way in which institutions make use of XRP, except that Ripple's stablecoin RLUSD, introduced at the end of 2024, can now be used in its place. Ripple's business has never looked stronger, but the strength isn't flowing to XRP, and that's likely to continue. I wouldn't invest in XRP, although I know plenty of people would disagree with me. There's a hyperlink there at People Would Disagree text, which takes you to a forecast of XRP, which is quite optimistic. Now, let's debunk this, because like I said in the start, this isn't entirely accurate, although it does make sense. If you look at it superficially, sure, it makes sense. It especially makes sense because holders have been looking for an answer for why they are always hearing good news about Ripple, but it never impacts the price. And these holders might be satisfied with the answer that this article gave. But here's the reality. The reality is that XRP and RLUSD aren't enemies that are fighting to replace each other. They're actually working together in a lot of real-world cases right now. Take Bitso, for example, the biggest crypto platform in Latin America. Just a few weeks ago, they expanded their Ripple payment setup, and they're using RLUSD for the stable dollar side of things, and they are using XRP as the actual fast bridge to settle transfers between the US and the Latin America. Every time money moves through that corridor, XRP gets bought and sold on the ledger. That creates real demand pressure, not just software messaging. And the same thing is happening with new stablecoins like the Australian Dollar One or AUDD that was launched on the XRP ledger. They're building extra rails that actually let on-demand liquidity or ODL to work in more countries at once. Now, what this means is the system is getting bigger and more flexible, and XRP is still the neutral bridge asset that connects all these stable pieces together. And on top of that, the XRP ledger itself is growing way beyond just Ripple's corporate deals. We're seeing thousands of new automated market maker pools pop up. We have DeFi experiments that are taking off, and we even have privacy upgrades that are coming soon that will make the whole network more useful. Now, every single transaction, whether it's a tokenized asset moving or a DeFi trade, it still burns a tiny bit of XRP as a fee. It's only a fraction of a penny, but when you multiply that by millions of payments a day, it adds up and it creates steady buying pressure that has nothing to do with Ripple net messaging. And don't forget the ETFs either. Over $1.4 billion has already flowed in, and institutions like Goldman Sachs are holding hundreds of millions of dollars in XRP just for working capital and hedging. That is direct demand for the token that exists completely separate from any bank using Ripple's software. So yeah, the article is right that there is a real gap right now. Ripple, the company, is killing it. But XRP, the token, isn't automatically riding the wave like we all hoped. RLUSD stablecoin did take over some of the old on-demand liquidity flows because banks hate volatility, and a lot of big partners are still just using the messaging layer without touching XRP. And that explains why we're seeing a 60% drop even with all the good news. But calling it a permanent won't save it situation, I think it goes too far. The hybrid model is already here. On-demand liquidity volumes are still climbing year over year. The ledger is getting more independent utility every month. And when the bigger macro picture finally turns, like we get lower interest rates, we get more risk on money in crypto, that extra demand from real usage plus the ETF inflows, they will start showing up in the price. If it was just XRP and not the stablecoin, the RLUSD, many banks and institutes won't even use Ripple. So RLUSD has created its own use cases. It hasn't stolen them from XRP. So the lesson here is quite simple. Stop assuming that Ripple headline equals instant XRP moonshot. The company's success is real, and it's building a stronger foundation for the ledger long term. But the token price only moves when actual XRP gets bought, gets held and used, not just when the logo appears in some, press release. The disconnect is real today, but it's not forever. So manage your expectations. Don't assume that every headline has a direct impact on XRP. Some headlines do, and it depends on the market, while others will take a while to actually impact XRP's price in the long run. And that's the clear picture that the article missed. And you might be frustrated because you might be watching all of these YouTubers talking about all these XRP events, the Ripple events, and they will be very bullish on the token that just based on this event, purely from this event, the price of XRP is going to moonshot. It is going to skyrocket because this happened and that happened. People will get frustrated because nothing actually happens. And you'll see a lot of angry comments down there. YouTubers are milking this cow that is XRP. They're making videos on it every time there's an event, and they will predict that the price of token is going to increase because they think that's what the people want to hear. But it isn't actually happening because there's a gap there. So in that regards, the article is right that these events, they're not directly using XRP, so it's not actually impacting, it's not creating a buying pressure for XRP that will lead the price up. It's using Ripple's infrastructure, their network, their products. And in some of those cases, some institutes, some banks, some companies, they are indeed using XRP, or XRP is being used in the process, but overall it's not being used directly, which isn't impacting the price. But in the long run, it is definitely going to help XRP. None of these events that we have talked about, they're not wasted. They are building the foundation so that when the macro elements improve, that's when XRP can moonshot. The price of it can skyrocket. So these events are basically building the rails for it. So don't expect instant moonshot. Don't believe on YouTubers that says that these events are going to cause a moonshot. It most probably won't. If the macro improves, that's when we can get these sort of moonshots, but not now. The article is right about one thing, that the gap is there, but it's wrong that it will always stay this way. It won't stay this way. It definitely helps Ripple. It definitely helps XRP. And in future, its price will have a much stronger base to grow from. So that's my opinion on this. If you like this sort of content, make sure that you give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And I'll see you guys in the next video shortly. So stay tuned.